Here are some of the stories you'll see next on Channel 6 News. More than 20 people from an Ohio church were injured today in a bus accident on I-65. Only one person seriously injured. We've got a definite maybe today from Lieutenant Governor John Muntz on Indiana's chances for the GM Saturn plant. And does the city of Greencastle have enough fire protection this afternoon? Linda Lupier will have details.
In other news, the city moves to do something about the juvenile center.
Ed Sorensen will have all the clay court highlights, and Bob McLain has the weather next on Channel 6 News.
From WRTV Indianapolis, Indiana's #1 newscast, the Channel 6 News, with Howard Caldwell, Clyde Lee, Tracey Horth, field anchor Gary Dick, meteorologist Bob McLain, and Ed Sorensen Sports.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the second time in a week, several people have been injured in a bus accident on a central Indiana highway. This time, the accident occurred in the northbound lanes of Interstate 65 just north of downtown. The injured are from a Dayton, Ohio church. Only one person is in serious condition. We have several reports. First, here's Cy Jenkins.
The church bus from Pickaway, Ohio was carrying 29 passengers, including 14 children, to an outing at the Indianapolis Children's Museum. The bus driver had been given directions to get off the interstate at 30th Street. But construction barricades channeling the traffic flow at this location confused the driver and those assisting him on the bus.
We got in the wrong road, so we suggested to my husband, the bus driver, that he pull over. Well, he thought he heard everybody say, "Go ahead, go, it's okay, go ahead and go," and it wasn't.
I saw this compact car coming, and I was concerned about it. You had a little tiny car, so it sped past, and I thought, well, that's all of them. I pulled out, wham, trucks busted into me.
The bus just went out in front of me. I couldn't do nothing about it. Just went straight out.
We were the first crew on the scene, so we basically had to triage the whole situation with just the two of us, trying to pull patients and out of the vehicles, keep them out of the fuel, ascertain who's the most critical, who's the least injured, and trying to do all of that real quick. Those kind of situations are always bad. They never will be perfect just because of the nature of the situation, the traffic, the congestion, the crowds, the mess, the metal, the glass.
The bus driver said he had made the trip to Indianapolis many times before, but was unprepared for the changes caused by the construction work on the interstate, including the barricades that were crumbled by the impact of the crash. Investigators say no one will be charged in connection with the accident. Cy Jenkins, Channel 6 News.
Once the accident victims received preliminary treatment at the scene of the mishap, they were loaded into ambulances, made their way through the traffic to area hospitals for more extensive checkups. One by one, the ambulances carrying the accident victims arrived at Wishard Hospital. A total of 24 people were brought here. 12 needed no treatment. They waited in a conference room while the other 12 were examined by doctors. And by 2:30 this afternoon, 7 had been released.
Superficially, the patients appear to have multiple lacerations and abrasions, and we are obtaining some x-rays now to determine whether or not there are any fractures. Some of the patients were on backboards and stabilizing them so that we could further evaluate whether or not they had any other injuries.
Dr. McCarthy described the scene in the emergency room as orderly and calm, but she said none of the victims really were talking about the ordeal.
I talked to one patient that was had sustained some lacerations and had some blood, and she was only saying that she thought the blood had come from someone else. But other than that, they didn't tell me anything about what happened in the accident.
Representatives from Mayor Hudnut's office arrived at the hospital to make sure the people had shelter for the night, but the Red Cross is standing by to keep accident victims if needed. While the injuries at Wishard did not appear to be too serious, one woman, 65-year-old Laura Gilmore, was taken to Methodist Hospital, where she's listed in critical condition. Now, to update the situation, assistance from the Red Cross will evidently not be necessary. We're told that people from the church in Ohio are on their way to Indianapolis to pick up the accident victims at Wishard, and everyone at Wishard will be released tonight, which is good news, all except for Laura Gilmore, who's at Methodist. And the folks from Ohio are expected to arrive at Wishard about 5:30, and then more than likely they'll turn around and go back home.
Fortunately, more people weren't more seriously injured.
The doctors at the hospital were saying they were awfully
lucky.
You know, this place where today's accident occurred has been a trouble spot for some time now, police say. Cy Jenkins is now live in Skycam 6 with more on that. Cy?
Clyde, we're over I-65 south of 30th Street, where both lanes of northbound interstate traffic are now flowing after being stopped for more than 3 hours by the accident. Looking down from here, we can see the kind of potential for the confusion that truck driver was talking about. Construction workers say motorists dart back and forth between those wooden barriers there in the middle of your picture, changing lanes regularly. And the workers say they expected a major crash here sooner or later. State police say the problem is so common and the danger so real, they've already seen an average of 1 accident per day since the barriers went up.
Well, we have a serious problem here with the construction the way it is, with people not knowing where they're at, being unfamiliar with the area. I don't know how it can be cleared up. It's just a problem we're going to have to live with for a while.
So you've had problems like this before, you're saying, with this construction here?
Well, I'm not saying we had problems with the construction. We're having problems with the motorists cutting through the construction barricades, trying to get from one lane to the other when the lane is closed.
The problems at this particular location are apparently more severe, but as motorists who drive the interstates daily probably already know, there are several trouble spots around the county currently involving interstate construction work. Clyde?
Cy, as we look there at the live shot, it looks like several accidents just waiting to happen. Any indication how long they're going to have to wait on this?
Apparently, they'll only have to wait less than a month. State police say that most of the construction work that is taking place is bridge repair work, and at this particular location, they expect the work to be completed by the middle of August. Clyde?
All right, Cy, thank you. Now, if the construction on I-65 is causing problems, authorities must be cringing over a project soon to begin on I-70 East. State Highway Department today took bids on the first segment of a 4-phase project to widen 70 to 4 lanes. This project will require the complete or partial closing of 5 interchanges as well as traffic restrictions that could last 2 years. The apparent low bidder for the project is Weddell Brothers Construction of Bloomington. The contract will be awarded officially on Friday. Construction could begin by mid-August. Howard?
To another problem area now. The Juvenile Detention Center doesn't need to be bigger, but it does need to be better. And Mayor William Hudnut announced steps today geared to make that happen. Derek Thomas joins us with more on that story. Derek?
Howard, last week Mayor William Hudnut and prosecutor Stephen Goldsmith paid an unannounced visit to the Juvenile Center. They didn't like what they saw, and the mayor is out to change that unpleasant view.
Maybe this is it. Maybe the dangerous Murphy beds and the 223-bed juvenile center will be a memory. Maybe, just maybe, the community will respond to what the Marion County Grand Jury said and what the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee said, that the center must be improved or a new one must be built.
We think that there's a critical problem here that the community must face. There's a serious division of opinion in the community about whether or not the building should be renovated or rebuilt, rehabbed, whatever you want to call it, or whether or not there should be a new facility built. I don't think there's much division of opinion about the condition of the facility right now. It's deplorable and, as Steve Goldsmith said, outrageous.
Hudnut has called for the State Board of Health and the State Welfare Department to begin regular inspection of the facility and for the city fire marshal to do the same. He has also instructed Gypsy to issue a long-range plan for the center by Labor Day. Additionally, he has asked the Juvenile Detention Center Advisory Board to recommend 5 individuals for the position of superintendent, from which he will choose one. Already this year, $500,000 has been spent to renovate the Juvenile Center. And according to Auditor Faye Mowry, $480,000 more must be spent to repair the roof. City Council President Bert Servas is convinced that a new facility is needed and would be unwise to pump additional monies into a building that will not work.
We may consider them ugly ducklings out there, but the ugly ducklings can grow into beautiful swans. And this facility is simply not adequate to the job.
Mayor Hudnut says it's too early to determine if a new center is needed, but he says he wants answers on exactly what should be done in 6 months.
Cost estimates for a new juvenile center range from $9 to $16 million, and if a decision is made to build, the mayor says both public and private funding methods will be explored. Howard?
All right. Thank you, Derek. Tracy?
Howard, the Marion County Board of Zoning Appeals denied a request for a zoning variance from Villages Incorporated. The Villages has operated a home for abused, abandoned, and neglected kids at 6135 North Meridian for over 2 years. But the neighborhood is zoned for single-family dwellings, and the city told the home it needed a zoning variance. A court battle ensued. The Villages lost there and again today when the board voted 4-1 against the home. An appeal is expected. Clyde?
For the second straight day, a top state leader has expressed discouragement about the chances of landing General Motors' big new Saturn plant. Yesterday it was Governor Orr. Today it was Lieutenant Governor John Mutz. State House reporter Norman Cox has details.
Mutz says he isn't officially throwing in the towel on Saturn, but he admits he's coming close. In a speech to the Indianapolis Rotary, he conceded it's been weeks since the state heard from GM about Saturn. He contrasted that with the almost daily contact between the state and Mitsubishi about its proposed plant, which he remains optimistic about getting. Mutz also hit on a theme first raised yesterday by Governor Orr. He said GM might not want to build Saturn here because it's put so much other investment here recently. That includes the new truck assembly plant being built in Fort Wayne and other major expansions in Kokomo, Anderson, Marion, and Indianapolis. Those investments total $1.7 billion, a figure that could pass $2 billion if another still undisclosed project becomes reality. Mutz says GM may simply want to avoid having too many of its eggs in the Indiana basket.
Now, I can understand the fact that this is a state in which this is GM's second largest employment state, 50,000 plus employees. And I can understand that it's the second largest state in terms of total investment. And so that may be a factor as they evaluate the future. But nevertheless, we as Hoosiers can be very proud of the kind of impression that we have made on General Motors management and on the kind of investments they continue to make here.
Good afternoon, Governor Orr's office.
GM officials have promised to make personal calls to the governors of each state that doesn't get the Saturn plant to tell them that they've lost. So far, no such call has been received here in Governor Orr's office, but from the tone he and Mutz have taken so far this week, it might not be too much longer. I'm Norman Cox, Channel 6 News.
Still ahead on Channel 6 News, Linda Lupier reports from Greencastle on a funding problem with the fire department.
And will your local post office survive? Field anchor Gary Dick is live with that story. Gary?
Howard, the Postal Service is continuing to lose a lot of money. There's concern some smaller rural post offices might be in the offing for closing. We'll tell you about that story live on Channel 6 News.
Fire protection for one Indiana town may soon be weakened to the point it's going to be impossible to adequately fight a fire. Warnings of the danger ahead are coming from the fire chief of Greencastle. Linda Lupier was in Greencastle today and tells us more about this problem.
The residents of Greencastle, just like people in other cities and towns, probably don't give much thought to fire protection. But the state tax freeze, combined with a recent Supreme Court ruling that policemen and firemen must be paid overtime, has put the Greencastle Fire Department in a bind. The fire department is composed of 10 firefighters and the chief. Right now, at any given time, there are 3 or 4 men on duty who cover a 36 square mile area. However, a schedule of maximum hours set under the Fair Labor Standards Act would require each of those men to be paid for 24 hours overtime every 27 days. The city of Greencastle can't afford that, so the chief, Bob Elmore, has been asked to cut back. That means some days there would be 2 men or even just 1 man on duty.
They can go ahead and respond to the fire, and then as soon as other people are on station, respond to the fire in a car or in another truck. Because 2 men cannot fight a fire. It's impossible and affect any kind of rescue.
The chief proposes hiring 2 more firemen at a cost of $34,000 a year, or enlisting 15 volunteers at a total cost of $17,000 for equipment and insurance. If the city can't fund either of those proposals, the chief says he can't in good conscience continue.
I will be forced into the position of having to resign as fire chief in the city of Greencastle. I cannot place my family and myself in that jeopardy.
The population of Greencastle is 9,000. When DePaul University begins classes in the fall, 3,000 more people are added. The chief has been quoted as saying since DePaul pays no property taxes, perhaps its fire protection should be cut off. He softened that stand, and tonight at a meeting of the city council, DePaul officials will make an offer.
We are prepared, after discussions with the mayor that have gone on for over 6 months, to begin making annual payments to the city as a way of saying thank you.
Bottom says DePaul wants to be a good citizen and has planned for nearly a year to make some kind of financial contribution to the city. Whether that contribution will solve the fire department's financial problem is open to question. From Greencastle, Linda Lupier, Channel 6 News.
With losses mounting daily, the U.S. Postal Service says it is looking at a variety of cost-cutting measures. Some say that may threaten more than 200 small post offices statewide. Now, for more on this story, let's go live now to field anchor Gary Dick. Gary?
Tracey Horth, the U.S. Postal Service in downtown Indianapolis, the main office. This is a sorting area where some 4.5 to 5 million pieces of mail come in daily. Only about 10% of it, however, is manually sorted. As you see here, the rest is done by machines, because the Postal Service is going to more and more of that to become more efficient. And it needs to, because it's losing money in a big way, operating at a deficit of some $385 million at the present time. A study has indicated a way to cut money is to perhaps close some not so profitable smaller operations. Some 240 Indiana postal operations are on that so-called hit list. About a third of those in the 7th Congressional District, which runs along the western portion of the state, and in central Indiana. 2 of those sites are in Hendricks County.
One of those locations is in North Salem, a quiet farming community known around the Midwest for its antique shops. The post office here has 2 full-time employees and 3 part-time workers, like Irene Clark, who's been here since the post office moved to its new location about 10 years ago. It serves what people here say is a critical need, a nearby location to pick up mail or stamps, or just to chat for a while with people who literally are neighbors.
Small town, but around 600 population. And if they had to go to Danville to get their mail or wait for somebody to bring it, it's late enough as it is. You used to get mail out of Indianapolis mail a day and get it in the morning. A lot of times now, 2 or 3 days.
For a community like North Salem, we're a long ways removed from areas like Brownsburg, Danville, Indianapolis, and there's a lot of elderly people here that simply don't have the means to get to Danville or other places, and I think the post office is important to them.
There is also concern in places even smaller than North Salem, like Amo. Here, a number of people say because there are few businesses, the post office serves as somewhat of the heart of the community. The Amo facility is one that sees little traffic, one that would seem ripe for the budget-cutting acts. Postmaster Dennis Watson says facts and figures, however, don't tell the whole story.
It's really more important than just the mail service, because a post office gives a town an identity to start with. And when you've got a small community like this, we don't have any businesses, you lose your post office, you just about lost it. When someone passes away or a close family member, why we put a box out here and collect money if anyone wants to donate money, you know, for flowers, and we send flowers from the community.
So it's like you say, it's more than a...
It's more like a family than it is a business.
The small post offices are threatened by mounting losses piling on the post office, estimated by some at $1 million a day. Just last week, postal officials said belt-tightening measures will be implemented. But 7th District Congressman John Myers said today, while steps are needed to improve the system, improvement at the cost of smaller postal offices is irresponsible.
I don't think they would close them tomorrow, but probably in the next few months they could be closed. And that would mean it'd be consolidation. Instead of a smaller community where we have a post office today, it would be consolidated into a rural route of one of the larger communities, probably maybe the county seat or some larger city, which means that we wouldn't have the services in the post office for stamps, for money orders, and the various things that we do still use our post office. They would be put on a rural route.
The U.S. Postal Service, however, says now it is not considering closing any facility in Indiana. It says the study looked only at dollars and cents and not at actual delivery. Therefore, 107 locations across the country are on a hit list, the so-called hit list. None are in Indiana, at least right now. It's a situation that will be reported on, I'm sure, a number of times in the future as the Postal Service attempts to come to grips with its mounting deficit. Field anchor Gary Dick reporting live from downtown Indianapolis, the U.S. Postal Service. Now back to the studio. Howard?
Thank you, Gary. The worst is over for the Gulf Coast of Florida since Tropical Storm Bob is reaching land. Earlier in the day, while the storm was still over water, 6-foot-high waves pounded Gulf beaches and heavy rains drenched southern Florida. Winds clocked at up to 70 miles an hour were reported at coastal areas. Since Bob is a tropical storm, most of its fury was well out in front of the center of the storm, and since it is now over land, it will begin to lose its punch. For an update on his namesake, Let's go to meteorologist Bob McLain. Bob?
Thanks, Howard. I won't be quite as windy as the nature's tropical storm, Bob. Here it is located right now. It's basically between Fort Myers and Lake Okeechobee, moving to the east-northeast now at only about 5 miles an hour. As you can see from our satellite picture, the brightest white and grays, indicating the strongest thunderstorm activity, is now extending from around the old Florida Everglades and Homestead, Florida, on up along the southeast coast, across Miami, Fort Lauderdale, to West Palm Beach, Florida. All of this is moving slowly to the east at about 10 miles per hour. As we move on to a graphic, we can see that the storm continues to drift off to the east-northeast at about 5 miles an hour. Winds, sustained winds, are up to about 40 to 50 miles an hour, with occasional higher gusts and some of the stronger thunderstorms, which are mainly now in the southeastern quarter of the Florida peninsula. Tides are running about 3 to 5 feet above normal along the southwest coast of Florida. But the interesting situation will come when Bob moves from the land back over the warm waters of the southwestern Atlantic and may undergo a further strengthening. We'll be back to take a look at our relatively quiet weather pattern in just a few minutes. Tracy?
Okay, Bob, still ahead on Channel 6 News, a major drug bust in the northern part of the state.
And more encouraging news on the inflation front today. We'll have details next.
I'm Call for Help reporter Ben Morriston. The American Housing Corporation says it's getting out of the single-family home business. We'll tell you what that'll mean to the owners of new American-built homes coming up on Channel 6 News.
Federal agents and local police today wrapped up a 3-year investigation involving 4 major drug distribution rings in northern Indiana and northern Illinois. Millions of dollars worth of drugs and at least 2 caches of weapons were confiscated at a number of locations in 4 Indiana cities and several Illinois sites in a pre-dawn raid. More than 100 people are suspected of operating the ring. In the raids, police found numerous weapons, including an Uzi submachine gun, along with $80 million worth of cocaine and heroin. And here in the capital city, a would-be bank robber changed his mind about sticking up an Indiana National Bank branch this morning. The bandit put a note on the counter demanding large bills. But while the teller was on the telephone, the man panicked, grabbed the note, and ran out of the bank without the money. No weapon was seen by either customers or employees, and no one was hurt. The bandit is described as a black male, 25 years old, 5'8", with a thin build. Howard?
The White House says it's pleased with the latest government figures on inflation. For the first half of the year, prices are running at a modest annual rate of 3.7%. That's somewhat better than the pace set during the same time last year. Spokesman Larry Speake says the report shows that inflation's still under control and will likely stay that way the rest of the year. Toyota is joining the ranks of foreign car companies that are building cars in the United States. The company says beginning in 1988, it will start building about 200,000 cars a year in America. Plant location hasn't been decided, but Japanese news reports say sites in the South and the Midwest are being examined.
President Reagan is working back into a light official schedule. He made his first public appearance for official duties this afternoon at the White House. ABC's Steve Shepard has a report.
Just 3 days after leaving his hospital bed, President Reagan walked to the south lawn of the White House to host a welcoming ceremony for President Lee of the People's Republic of China. While Mr. Reagan's voice wasn't quite back to normal, he appeared reasonably well for a man just recovering from surgery, and he appeared enthusiastic that a Chinese president was at last visiting Washington.
Ours is an increasingly productive relationship based not on personality or momentary concerns, but on a recognition that our nations share significant common interests and an understanding of the many benefits we reap from the goodwill between us.
For his part, President Lee appeared gratified that Mr. Reagan was able to attend the welcoming ceremony at all.
Mr. President, I'm very happy to see that you are recovering so fast, and I'm deeply touched by your participation in this welcoming ceremony.
In private, the two leaders held discussions on trade, the status of Taiwan, arms control efforts in Geneva, and other issues. Late this afternoon, representatives of both governments signed agreements on the exchange of nuclear technology and on culture, education, and fishing. The nuclear agreement will allow American companies to sell reactors to China, something the Chinese have long wanted, but until now the U.S. has been unwilling to grant. Steve Shepard, ABC News, the White House.
The 5th District congressional race will get another entrant tomorrow. Republican State Treasurer Jillian Ridlin has scheduled a series of news conferences to kick off his campaign. Last week, State Senator Jim Butcher of Kokomo threw his hat into the ring. The race to succeed the retiring Congressman Bud Hillis is expected to attract at least a half-dozen Republicans.
Now to Ed Sorensen, who is at the Clay Courts tournament at the Sports Center. Ed?
Another day, the Sports Center has become, Howard, our home away from home. The sports will be live from the Clay Courts today, as usual. And not only will we talk tennis, but boxing as well. A lot of jaw flapping going on at a press conference involving Spinks and Holmes. Sports is next. Welcome back, everyone. We are live with our sportscast again today at the Sports Center in Indianapolis, scene of the 85 U.S. Open Clay Courts Championships. As you can see, all quiet here in the stadium court at this hour. A match just finished down there on the green clay. 7th seed Jose Luis Clerc, a veteran, outstanding clay quarter, won 6-4 in the 3rd set over John Ross, who was unseeded. These guys bickered, they argued all the way, and frankly, I, for one, am glad that match is finally over. Now, some big news made off the court here about an hour ago. The number 4 seed Frenchman Yannick Noah showed up, and he is a big crowd favorite, really causes a stir whenever he's in town for a tournament. He comes here on the heels of a victory last night in the final match of the D.C. Classic in Washington. We have some highlights of that one to take a look at. Not only is Noah in town, but also the guy he beat last night, Martin Haite. Haite from Argentina here in the near court. Now, Noah, of course, won the French Open a couple of years ago. He is extremely acrobatic, very talented. That could be Noah in the near court because I've got a little blurry monitor I'm trying to take a look at here. Anyway, it was 4-1 Haite in the first set before the 25-year-old Noah, that's him right there, rallied and won the opening set 6-4. He's just superior to Haite at the net. Haite, a fine young baseliner, but he really doesn't have much more than the baseline game at this point. 6-3 was the score in the second set. Noah winning by scores of 4 and 3. Match point coming up right here. And Noah's first match, incidentally, I know a lot of you folks out there are big fans of Yannick Noah. His first match here at the Clay Courts will be in the morning at 11 o'clock on Court 1. He wins last night in D.C. and comes right over here to Indianapolis to go for 2 in a row. Right now, the Indianapolis Colts continuing their training camp up at Anderson College in Anderson. Brian Hammond's up there again today for another report. Tonight, Brian takes a look at the backfield situation.
The Colts' backfield is pretty solid, with Curtis Dickey and Randy McMillan starting, backed up by Frank Middleton and George Wansley. But the 5th spot may be up for grabs, and 2 players hoping to win that position have local ties. Orlando Brown from Indiana University and Mark Brooks of Notre Dame. Both feel good about their chances.
If I just stay consistent and just perform at my best every day, I think I have a pretty good chance. You never know. It's just a lot of good talent here. And, you know, you just have to work and just wait and see what happens.
You know, I'm just going to go at it one day at a time and work as hard as I can. And I'll leave the evaluation process up to coaches.
Both Brown and Brooks are looking good on the field, but half the battle is learning the Dowhauer system. So a lot of time is spent with their nose in the playbook.
I'm coming around pretty good because I ran this type of offense under Sam White at Indiana. And so far, it's pretty clear to me. It's coming around.
It's a multifaceted offense, and if you keep your head on straight, I think we'll win a lot of ball games with it.
From Anderson College, this is Brian Hammonds for Channel 6 Sports.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Quickly to boxing. September 21st, a big fight. Larry Holmes will take on Michael Spinks for the World Heavyweight Championship. If Holmes, the current heavyweight champ, wins, he will tie Rocky Marciano's all-time career record at 49-0 and have the opportunity, quite naturally, to go 50-0 and break the Rock's record. Today, there was a press conference in New York, and as usual, at these types of events, they were throwing a lot of verbal punches. Let's take a listen.
I'm going to knock the jinx off of Spinks, and that's no lie. But anyway, my record speaks for itself, 48 fights, 34 knockouts, and I'm sure that I'm going to have another knockout, and Spinks will be that 49th fight. Regardless, whatever they thinking now, this man is making history. He will be the man that Larry Holmes knocked out on his 49th fight.
So when I fight this fight, I'm doing it for more than just myself, my family, all of my family of friends that I have accumulated all over the world. I'm doing it also for The Rock.
All right. We'll have a Clay Courts update in about 15 minutes. Right now, that'll do it for Sports Live from the Sports Center. Back to Tracey in the studio.
Thanks, Ed. When we return, Call for Help reporter Ben Morriston will tell us about a financially strapped construction company causing problems for many people.
And Citizens Gas says it needs more. Stay with us.
You've just bought your dream home, but you're having problems getting your builder to live up to his promises, and that's the problem some Indianapolis new homeowners are facing. Call for Help reporter Ben Morrison is here with that story. Ben?
Howard, we've had a number of complaints from people who've bought homes built by American Housing Corporation. We've also learned the home builder is getting out of the business of building single-family homes now. However, I'm told American still intends to take care of their customers.
Mike and Margie Mays bought their new home in April. Theirs is one of about a half dozen built by the American Housing Corporation in the Liberty Creek subdivision. Since they moved in, there have been problems with the home and problems getting the builder to take care of the problems under their one-year warranty.
According to the mortgage company, we were to, of course, obviously have proper seeding. We were to have 5 shrubs and a tree, and as you can see, we have 5 dead shrubs and no tree, and the landscaping speaks for itself.
Now, in fairness to them, American did make some repairs here. They reconnected the drain under the shower. However, they failed to relay the flooring. They've also failed to install the shutters on the windows.
It's disappointing, very disappointing when you get your first, quote, dream home, it is for us, and to have these problems that you can't have rectified when the other neighbors who have other builders have had theirs fixed pretty much for the most part.
Across the street, Gene Young has similar problems, things like a lawn that didn't turn out and troubles with the paint.
Promise you everything, but they don't show up, or they show up and don't have tools, or go to get paint and never come back, and just everything. They promise us everything, but they've come across with nothing.
Sue Cosper moved into her American-built home 10 months ago. She says American promptly made good on some repairs to things like the cracked garage floor, but the company can't seem to make all of the necessary repairs.
Paint is peeling off on the outside, and I have a problem with water seeping in under the crawl space.
American's Mike Martin wants all of you homeowners to detail in writing your problems, assigning a dollar value to the work that needs finished. Martin says American will either make a cash settlement with each homeowner or make arrangements to make repairs. Martin also says even though American will no longer be selling single-family homes, the company will maintain people on their payroll to finish all work on houses still under construction. If the company doesn't take care of your problems within a reasonable amount of time, once you've put them in writing, let me know.
All right, thank you, Ben. Clyde?
Citizens Gas is making a second attempt to get money the Public Service Commission denied it in 1983. Testimony began today on Citizens' request for $14.7 million. The increase is part of a larger rate hike, which was partially denied 2 years ago. Citizens did not like the ruling, so it went to the state appeals court, which ordered the PSC to rehear this case. Just recently, Citizens filed a $6.8 million decrease, the result of reduced charges by its gas pipeline supplier.
Now we'll check in with Bob McLain, and we can use all the weather like this that you can give us.
Boy, we certainly can. Anytime you can make out like we've done in the past 24 hours in July, you've done yourself mighty good. We'll see if that will continue right after these words.
Bob McLain weather bears the seal of approval of the American Meteorological Society.
Good afternoon, everyone. You probably saved yourself a couple of bucks last night by not running the fan or air conditioning and instead letting nature do all of the cooling. All of this cooler and drier air brought to us by nature, courtesy of an area of high pressure that this morning was centered up around the Alpena, Michigan area. Now remember, the winds blow around in a clockwise fashion around the high pressure system, so that means our air was coming to us kind of out of a northeasterly direction, which pulled down the cooler and drier air out of the eastern portion of Canada. And this morning set numerous record low temperatures. 38 at Marquette, it was 46 at Green Bay, also at Madison, 52 at Dubuque, 45, that was at the report from Grand Rapids, and 42 came in from Alpena. These were not records down here, 56 at Indianapolis, 57 at Chicago, and 63 at Cincinnati, but they still fell into that sort of comfortable classification. Well, it was just about a month ago that we sort of reached our peak. With the altitude of the sun in the sky and the length of the day, we had 15 hours at which the sun was at or above the horizon on June the 22nd, and the sun set about 31 degrees north of west. But even though the first third of summer has just slipped by the boards, we're already beginning to slide down that track toward the colder weather. You can see it. We've almost, or already have lost almost a half an hour of sunlight. And the sun now is beginning to move south along the horizon when it rises and sets. now only setting about 26 degrees north of due west. And of course that trend will continue as time goes on and as we move closer and closer to the fall and winter season. Well, remember last Friday we were talking again about elevated pollution levels, mainly due to ozone. Here you can see sort of a graph of the pollution index during the past several days. A report was not made on Sunday, so that's why that report is not included. You can see we sort of reached a peak on Friday and Saturday, and then look what happened by Monday. A noticeable drop in the overall pollution concentration due to the change of air mass and also due to precipitation on Sunday, a scattering of showers and thunder showers. We're talking about that area of high pressure that brought us the fair skies. Look at this area right in here. This is where the dry air is situated, connected with this area of high pressure. And as we begin the motion, you can see the fingers of moisture coming back up along the western side of that area of high pressure. And we'll begin to feel a little bit more moisture tomorrow, and then also even more on Thursday. And then with the approach of this frontal zone that's in the northern plains, coupled with that moisture flowing north off the Gulf of Mexico, we'll probably see an increasing threat of showers and thunder showers by late in the day on Thursday and Thursday night. Lots of showers and thunder showers from the southeast up through the central and southern Rockies. Mineral Wells, Texas, had 3 inches of rain in a half an hour this morning as those slow-moving, locally heavy thunderstorms passed overhead. Here's that bubble of comfort over much of New England, extending westward into our area, into the middle Mississippi River Valley. But you can see it's beginning to warm up over the nation's midsection, and that will be the trend that we will be feeling over the next couple of days. Well, outside right now, as we check our current conditions, we find that we have generally fair skies. Our temperature is 80 degrees. Winds are east at 8 miles an hour. Look how comfortably low that humidity is. That means a quick drop of temperature after the sun goes down. Today's high was 81, and the morning low was 56. Here's my forecast now for tonight. Starry skies and cool temperatures. The mercury dipping down mid-50s to about 60. So another very comfortable night tonight. Fair and mild tomorrow with highs mid to upper 80s. You'll begin to feel a little bit more moisture in the atmosphere. And by Thursday, it'll be probably downright warm and muggy with a chance of showers developing in the late afternoon and evening. Highs mid-80s to about 90.
So not too bad for the middle of July.
Another comfortable night tonight.
Thanks, Bob.
When we return, Ed Sorensen will be back with today's action from the clay courts.
Coverage of the U.S. Open Clay Courts Tennis Championships is brought to you by Culligan Dealers of Central Indiana and by First Bank and Trust Company.
Welcome back to another live Clay Courts update from here at the Indianapolis Sports Center. I'm Ed Sorensen to tell you that today was a real big day. Both defending champions, Manuela Maleva on the women's side and Andres Gomez on the men's side, played their first matches today. They both won, but for one of them at least, it was not easy. Here's a report.
The opening round matches for the defending clay court champions could not have been more of a contrast. On the ladies' side, top seed and reigning titleist Manuela Maleva breezed to an easy win over Linda Gates. The 18-year-old Bulgarian didn't lose a game in the opening set, and she went up 4-love in the second set before she finally dropped a couple of games. After the match, Manuela talked about the possibility of meeting her 16-year-old sister, Katarina, the number 8 seed, at some point during the tourney. The two have never played a set against one another, although they practice together all the time.
We never talk when we have to play against each other. I mean, she feels bad, I feel bad. So we warm up together and everything we do together, and we just, you know, there has to be a winner.
You still want to win, though.
Yeah, you still want to win, and still you feel sorry if you beat your sister. You know?
While Maleva was winning in a breeze, the opposite was true for men's defender Andres Gomez. The 25-year-old southpaw from Ecuador, seated second here, had to fight for his life before finally downing unseeded Gabriel Erpe, 6-4 the score in the third set. Gomez is recuperating from several injuries that have limited his effectiveness when he has been able to play this year, and they've also shaken his confidence. At his post-match press conference, Gomez said he wasn't surprised at the closeness of his opening match because all his matches have been tough this year.
Since I haven't been playing well lately, I mean, I'm not surprised that everybody is playing well against me because I guess they know I've been injured and I haven't been playing, so they just put some extra effort to try to beat me. I mean, maybe my ranking is still number 5, but I really don't feel like number 5 in the world right now.
Andres, if they're going to give it to you, buddy, take it. We'll be back with more from the clay courts after this timeout. A couple of other clay courts notes from today very quickly. Indianapolis player Jane Holdren was not on the court very long. She took on Gabriella Sabatini, beautiful young girl, outstanding young tennis player, and lost by the dubious score of love and love. So Jane Holdren still had a pretty good tournament, though, because she won one match. Now tonight, the big match, 8 o'clock on the stadium court. Boris Becker, third seeded here, the 17-year-old Wimbledon champion, will take on Michael Pernfors, the two-time defending NCAA champion. We will have highlights and a live report for you at 10. More news after this timeout.
Finally, this afternoon, Greg Todd in his Hoosier Profile segment introduces us to a woman who is continuing work she began in the 1930s. It is work that has made her one of Indiana's most accomplished artists.
Few people have done more to advance the art of etching and printmaking than George Joe Mess and Evelyn Mess Daly. In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the Hoosier artists became nationally recognized for their work, particularly their prints. Evelyn recalls that they both attended Heron Art School knowing art would be their lifelong careers. After graduation, George opened a studio on Monument Circle.
Above Lyman Brothers Art Store. And he was doing advertising art and commercial art for a living. And I was doing fashion drawing, and both of us just intended to do nothing else but art. And in fact, I've done some artwork every day of my life since.
George died in 1962, but Evelyn has continued to work from the Broad Ripple studio that has been her home for more than 50 years. It's filled with many of the works Evelyn and George produced over the years, including her 1948 oil painting, The Fountain of Youth, painted at University Park downtown, and George's Sailboat Regatta, painted in Chicago. Their works favor landscape, particularly the Indiana countryside.
Here's another landscape. I did that down at Aurora, Indiana.
Although they dabbled in many art forms, they're best known for their prints made from metal etches.
They're awfully hard to make, but I don't know why. I like to draw and painting. I like to paint too, but there's something fascinating about prints.
In fact, Evelyn says she has literally been drawing since she was in a high chair.
I've always been interested in etching, and even as a little girl, I enjoyed etchings on my parents' walls. And in order to see the tiny lines closer, I would get up in a chair and admire them.
It's those lines that distinguished Evelyn Mess Daly's work from George Joe Mess's. Her emphasis is on the line in a work, while George's works emphasize tone values.
He was primarily a painter and liked tones, worked in tone. And I liked line, so naturally I would do mostly line etchings.
Some of George's work is displayed on a wall of Evelyn's home. She thinks her best and most acclaimed work is the 1945 aquatint Adirondack Trail. Many of their works are reproduced in a biography of the Hoosier artists recently published by the Indiana Historical Society. It chronicles the careers of two of Indiana's significant artists, George Joe and Evelyn Mess. This is Greg Todd, Channel 6 News.
A look again at tonight's top stories. Over 20 people were injured, one critically, after a church bus traveling from Ohio on its way to the Children's Museum collided with a truck on I-65 in downtown Indianapolis. More evidence this evening that Indiana will not get the GM Saturn plant. State officials say they haven't heard from GM on the matter for several weeks. And Mayor Hudnut has asked several local agencies to begin looking at problems at the Marion County Juvenile Detention Center.
Coming up on Channel 6 News at 10, Derek Thomas concludes his series on Indianapolis revitalization and its effect on the poor. And Marilyn Mitzel has a report on a jaw disorder that is often misdiagnosed. Bob?
Howard, it'll be a beautiful evening for tennis down there at the sports complex. Fair skies, comfortably low humidities, and by morning, temperatures mid-50s to about 60. Tomorrow, fair and mild, maybe just a little bit more humid, mid to upper 80s.
ABC's World News Tonight is coming your way next. We'll see you again at 10 o'clock.
Good night.